Good day and welcome to the site You Are Not Alone webinar. I'm your host, David Sand, previous site global past president for 2013 and also CEO of Iwin International. Welcome to everybody that's joined in. We hope that you're going to have a good time listening to us, but more than anything, our objective is to give you some practical advice, encouragement and tips in running your business in this crazy disruptive time that has been brought on by the onset of COVID-19. I have with me on the call, on the webinar, three amazing people that I've had the privilege of knowing for quite some time, and all of them are part of the site global community. The first of the speakers, and thank you Didier for coming in on this call. I know how busy you must be at this time, but Didier is the site CEO and of the site global family, and he'll tell you a little bit more about where he's based today. He's either in Chicago or in Brussels, somewhere between the two, but probably locked down at his home in Brussels. Then we have Tes Proos, who is the current South African site chapter president. Tes lives in Cape Town and is working from her Cape Town home office. And again, she will also introduce herself. Then we have Daryl Keywood. Tes is also the owner and operator of Crystal Events DMC. Daryl Keywood represents Africa on the Site International Board as a board member. And he is also managing director and owner of Walters DMC with his wife, Heidi. And then I've given you a little bit of intro about myself. So enough introductions. We want to maximize the time. Just a little bit of house rules, please. In the Zoom tool that we're using to do this webinar, there is a Q&A section. So please, would you post us your questions? We will have time, at least 10 to 15 minutes to answer Q&As. So if you've got a question for any of the speakers, please you go. There's also a chat facility if you just want to leave encouraging chats as well. The speakers see them, and please encourage the speakers and give them the high five and thumbs up for their contribution along the way. Of course, this is the first time I'm doing such a thing. We're being ably assisted by Natalie Rosa in the background. She has just done a tremendous job of helping us set up. She's from the company Big Ambitions, and you all know her from the South African perspective as a wonderful host herself. Yeah, so let's get on with it. I'm going to segue right now to Didier. Didier, please give us the global perspective. What are the site members globally going through and saying at this time? And of course, also, what are you doing in your roles to advocate and help the industry at large?
Great. Well, thank you, David. Welcome, everyone, on this webinar. I could see, we have over 70 people online at the moment, so it's great. I'm Didier Scailet. I have the privilege of serving as the CEO for Site, which means I am the senior management person for the organization, reporting directly to our board of directors and our board of trustees. And in that capacity, I also have the privilege of serving on the board of EIC, which is the Events Industry Council. So, again, my role is really to coordinate all of the resources that we have within Site. And clearly, as David said, these are absolutely unprecedented times when it comes to the scale and the speed of the crisis that we're dealing with. Had all the way back to H1N1 and, Lehman Brothers and SARS and all of these, 9/11, all of these other crises that our industry has to face. This is by far, the largest, again, when it comes to being absolutely global. And again, the speed of which it evolves. So just want to give you here some of the responses. I mean, clearly as site, we've built a flipboard, we're aggregating tons of resources. I'll go back to that, but this is far beyond site. This is truly a global pan-industry crisis. So a lot of work that I've been putting into this over the last kind of 3 weeks. Thank God I had the privilege of traveling in February and being in Joburg for Meetings Africa. When I came back from all of these trips, was pretty much the start of the lockdown. So the next slide. The Events Industry Council is indeed an organization of 33 organizations in the sector, and it's representing about over 100,000 professionals in the sector. It goes from PCOs to DMCs to incentive travel professionals to independent meeting organizers to the trade show industry. To it really is a broad spectrum of everyone who is interested in the business events community or the MICE industry as we know it. Now, a lot of resources have been developed and put into obviously dealing with COVID-19. You'll see that on the next slides. We've assembled information when it comes to legal advice. On the next slide, force majeure, some of the definitions of what it means, a lot of industry insight as well. Some tips in terms of, hybrid meetings or going to virtual meetings. So basically dealing with business continuity. Next slide. I have to emphasize the speed of response that, the industry has taken in that respect. Really the outbreak, and it wasn't really an outbreak at that point in time, but the early signs of coronavirus coming into play were obviously in Wuhan, in the Hubei province of China in December and, late December. And so, as early as the 30th of January, EIC issued a statement. Then from there on, you can see a timeline of, how the Events Industry Council has been able to provide, again, resources for the crisis in itself. Now, on the next slide, you will see, and that's something that might be helpful for each and every one of you on this webinar, is kind of looking at, what are the statements that we've made. We've actually just released a new statement yesterday. And again, this is all about, facts over fear in many ways. That was kind of the first motto behind all of this. And, these are the key messages. Again, this is unprecedented. We certainly want to make sure that we acting responsibly. Right now, as David alluded, I'm splitting my life between Chicago, Brussels, and the rest of the world. I'm in Brussels at the moment. And, there's some very clear indications in terms of confinement. And I guess our biggest recommendation at the moment is follow the rules, follow the instruction. But at the same time, let's keep on business continuity altogether. Now, when we talk about facts, on the next slide, you will see a first webinar, which is really identifying reliable sources. Again, this is still available online if you want to listen to it. But it's kind of, what are the well of information that you can go to find true facts. The second webinar that we held was really around industry insight, again, covering some of the insurance liability, force majeure standpoint. And that was on the next slide, webinar 2. So again, these are still available. On the next slide, you will see, the aggregation of all of the industry association resources. Obviously, SITE is there with our own Flipboard. But again, there's simply tons of information that you can find in terms of how the industry is responding. And how the industry is responding, on the next slide, you will see we've conducted a survey. We did our own as SITE, but this is the EIC one. And these are the key things that our community has identified as being the answers that you would need. So again, you will find a lot of that either on the SITE website, or you will find that on the EIC website. There is also a risk management guidebook to kind of navigate through, what are the risks and how do we handle those. Then there is, tremendous opportunity on the next slide, never waste a good crisis. It has given us an opportunity to also talk to the mainstream media, and that's something that I would certainly encourage us to do. We clearly an industry that's been really heavily hit by this. Final slide is really on the CMP program in itself. And obviously, EIC has extended some latitude in terms of people wanting to recertify for CMP. So I guess core message here is these are daring times, daring straits, but there is tons of resources out there. And back to the topic of this webinar, you're not alone. There is a tremendous amount of resources that you can tap into.
I was trying to, we're also broadcasting on Facebook Live, so I was trying to get your slides shown to the audience as well. The next speaker, Daryl, if I could ask you please to give your perspective as a business owner, a DMC in the South African context. Over to you, Daryl.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it's tough for everybody out there, and I think what we've got to try through the next weeks and months, and hopefully not too many months, is keep perspective. You can't just sit and wait for events to unfold around you, and I think many of us that have our own businesses, whether they're large or small, have been losing sleep at night and trying to work our way through this so that we emerge at the end of, however long it takes, with our businesses still intact and our employees still employed as far as we can. In Africa, we're lagging the infection curve that you've seen initially in China and now in Europe and the rest of North America. And we are, from Natalia's SATSA webinar the other day and other media, we're where Italy was 3 weeks ago. And if you think of what's happening in Italy, we just hope that advance warning has prepared us better. But I wanted to just kind of go through, almost the 3 phases that we have and are busy and still will be undergoing over the next weeks and months. And that's, phase 1 really was, the immediate impact around the rest of the world, and then the initial impact on us in South Africa, and I guess for most of the continent, sort of a phase 1, which for us is almost complete, was dealing with the immediate on the ground, people that were in country that needed to be repatriated. Our business has one person left who doesn't want to go home. Their flight is early next week on KLM back to Holland, and they have relatives here, and that one person has said, well, he's not going home. If KLM stops flying, he's just staying. We're kind of through that part and into a second phase, which is, all the inquiries of cancellations and postponements, and we're a little bit in uncharted waters. Didier highlighted that, force majeure and there are further webinars coming up. Natalia and I were talking with the rest of the panelists about the insurance and all those kind of things that's going to be highlighted over the next few weeks and on other webinars. So tune into some of those. But yeah, we're dealing with a lot of cancellations and postponements. For us, fortunately, most clients seem to want to postpone, which is great, but understand that's not the same for everyone. We deal predominantly with MICE groups, although we do have an FIT business, and they need to meet, they need to run an incentive program, and most of our conference incentive business is postponing rather than cancelling. That's great. Then, what we call phase 3, which has started for us already in the middle of phase 2, is ensuring our business survives. And I think that's a critical, situation for all of us in the industry, whether you're a hotelier with a 500-room hotel or a DMC or a tourist attraction or activity operator with 3 or 5 employees, is how do we make sure that we're still here? And each business has a different set of circumstances. So if you're in a situation where you have no reserves, what do you do? If you have some reserves, how do you make sure that you kind of stretch those out and get through the crisis? And I can only really run through our company's situation, and we're fortunate. We have some reserves. However, we probably don't have 6 to 12 months worth of reserves that we can just keep going as we have been in the past. So the first steps for us were, going to the representatives that represent our business overseas, and saying, look, can we pay you a reduced fee or no fee going forward? We had a meeting with our landlord yesterday. We have a lease and it still has 1.5 years to run, but we are negotiating with him to reduce the impact of that. You need to be proactive and reduce your cost base. Fortunately, a lot of our marketing expenses involve international trade shows, and they have mostly been cancelled or postponed, which means we don't have to fork out cash for them, which has certainly helped the cash flow. The second thing we've taken a very strong approach to, and that is we're sitting on some of our clients' money, deposits that have been paid for future events. And the temptation is to use those funds to help prop up our business. But we've taken the policy decision to ring fence those funds, not to touch them, and to work in terms of our forward plan on exactly our own funding. And so our accountant is probably going to be doing this for the next few weeks and months, is just preparing every second day a cash flow forecast, where we are, who's paid us this money, what we need to pay up, that kind of thing. The end of this
can I ask you to wrap up a little bit?
Yeah, I'm right there at that point. The end of that process is making sure that we have a business down the road. And I just want to end off with some really positive news, I think, and that is we've had 5 new requests in this week for new events, and we've had clients that are over optimistically trying to, in my view, book for June. We're probably going to have to repostpone those further out, but there is business out there, and I think if you can ensure that you survive for the next, say, 3, 4, 5 months, you'll come through stronger, and probably the playing field will be a little less competitive at the end of that. So keep the faith, communicate, collaborate as we are doing now, and hopefully we'll all get through this together.
Magic, Daryl, thank you for that perspective and that real honest insight into what's going on in your life and in your business. I'm sure there's going to be quite a few questions that come to you about some of those things. So guys, just remember, if you have questions, post them in the Q&A section. I'm now going to go over to Tes. Tes, please introduce yourself and as well, and then give us the perspective as the Africa site president. What's happening on the African continent? What's your perspective, and what are some of the initiatives that you are involving yourself in to help in this time of challenging time?
Thank you, David, and hello, everybody. So my name is Tes Proos, and I'm now speaking with my hat as president of the African chapter. And I'm very happy to see that we've got quite a few of our African members on the call, and a few from further away. I think I'd just like to add on to what Daryl's been saying. It's very hard to stay alive in these circumstances. There are going to be loads of job losses, we know that. And what I'd like for you, not just in a personal capacity, but pass it on to your staff. People are going to struggle to pay rent, pay bonds, pay cars, pay water and lights towards the end of this month and next month. Talk to the banks, talk to the insurance companies. In fact, I know of one or two insurance companies that call it a vacation. You can take up to a 6-month vacation from paying your retirement annuities, for instance, without actually defaulting. They will keep that in place for you until you have a regular income again. Just after the SATSA webinar, which Natalie kindly hosted the other day, important things that came up is, do we have any recourse through our insurance companies? And Tony Romali's response was, he did ask the question, and the reply was basically, you're on your own. So if I'm not mistaken, David Frost from SATSA undertook to have some conversations with the larger insurance companies to see where the industry stands. Also from Martin West's side, head of TourWest, I think he basically said, write 2020 off. I would like to take a less pessimistic view, especially hearing from Daryl that you still have new inquiries coming in. I mean, that's really encouraging. But Africa, and South Africa, certainly with our cases, it's still early days for us. We joined the race quite late. So it could get worse before it gets better. And we're looking at countries like Australia, which has gone on complete shutdown. Rwanda also has announced a complete shutdown. I think Kenya is there as well. I think a few more African countries might go that way. And under the circumstances, it's probably the most sensible thing to do. As we all know, quite a few lodges and some hotels have decided to close for at least 2 months. To minimize the impact of the virus spreading. And it's also been encouraging to see all the precautions and safety measures that's been popping up in shops and stores and everywhere. And also play parks being closed and that sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure we see that all over Africa. I think the very important thing we need to work on collectively is, let's say this carries on for another 3 months. We've had to lay off staff, cut back, downsize. The bank managers also knocking on the door. All the wolves are there. What are we going to do? Will we be ready for when the business returns? And I think that's an important topic we should discuss in the near future. I think that's all from me for now, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Tess. I can hear in your tone and your voice how concerned you are about this. One of the things that I wrote, watched recently on posted by a friend in the US, was an address by the CEO, I think, of the Marriott International Hotel chain, and quite clearly, this whole thing is creating a monster impact on leadership around the world and organizations. And the level of impact is not just the numbers, it's an emotional impact and an emotional and social impact. And I think we not only need to be talking about the economic impact, but also the social impact of this. It certainly is changing the world. And I want to now use this time, not really to talk about the impact, but to talk about what what I believe we should be doing as leaders, and really addressing this elephant in the room that you alluded to, Tes, is how are we going to ensure that our businesses survive? Because the reality is that our businesses could fail. And if we do not act now with purpose and integrity, it could be even more messy than it needs to be. So one thing the world is doing right now is looking for governments and banks to potentially bail them out. And the reality is that that could take some time, and it might not be quick enough in terms of financial aid packages and so on. And of course, in Africa, we know that that could take even longer than we have time for. So what really is the next thing that we need to be doing? And I think there are several things that you need to do all at the same time as a leader. Multitasking is what is required, and I believe it's the name of the game. I'm kind of told that men are not really that good at multitasking, so we're going to have to stretch a little more than our very competent female counterparts in leadership. So, of course, I personally don't believe that one can't multitask, especially in our mice industry. When you run a project, you're multitasking all the time. So we have that core DNA skill set within each one of us. So, you know, it is not optional at this time for leaders. Multitasking is the name of the game. But I'm going to share with you a mental picture, and on my screen, an image of a slatted wine barrel, hopefully. Let's have a look. Where is this? Here we go. So this slatted wine barrel, and I'm not sure exactly where I got this analogy from, but it's a mental picture that came out of some of the coaching sessions that I have personally, as an individual, been part of. And I found this analogy incredibly useful as a business leader or owner, and in what to do in a crisis, and also in time of prosperity, to keep advancing a business and its sustainability. So I'm going to kind of give part of the credit of this to one of my secret coaches, AKA number 8. We call him number 8 because he was the 8th secret member of our management team at the time. And his name is Daniel Trudy. Daniel is very well known in the mice world. He owned an agency called Spectrum or Spectra, and he sold that to Grassroots many years ago. And he is a Zurich-based entrepreneur, but now he's also very much involved as a journalist. So when the global financial crisis of 2009 hit the world, our contracted revenue as a company plummeted from upwards of 100 million to about 30 million in one swift and dramatic drop. Now, that kind of drop is being experienced by our businesses today across the board. And that then has massive impacts for everything. So, of course, quite honestly, at the time, I was personally near suicidal. And I joked with my South African managing director at the time, Hugh Tuckett, who today is the CEO of Euromic, about me being worth more dead than alive. And I should have just jumped off the building, and then kind of that was what my mind frame was. And I think, mental health at this time in a crisis like this is something that we need to be honest about. It takes a massive toll on our mental well-being. So we need to surround ourselves with people that can talk into that space and encourage us and grow us and help us walk out of that. And I certainly hope that listening in today might be one of those moments. So these were the negative thoughts that I had and paralyzing thoughts that gripped my mind. If you were anywhere near or just that right now, or just feel so overwhelmed and mentally stressed to the extent that your fear is paralyzing you from being vaguely productive, you have to do something about it immediately. What I, at that stage, then reached out to this friend of mine who I knew and who had managed a similar size business. That's Daniel Trudy. And asked Daniel to coach me through this incredible tough time. And it was a combination of his offer and my asking. I had used coaches before, but they were discipline specific, like finance or technology. And the illustration, let's go back to the illustration on the screen of this barrel. Let me explain it a little bit more. The slatted wine barrel makes up, in a traditional way, each slat of this barrel represents a key business focal point or discipline. And I'm going to just fly through them on the screen now. So people, innovation, marketing, clients, revenue and finance, sales, technology, product service, operations, supply chain, legal, and so on. So what happens in a crisis time like this is that the middle one, which is revenue, drops way down. And the value in your business starts pouring out and spilling like red wine on the floor, wasted. And because the revenue in the business is the lifeblood of your business, it then all of a sudden affects the other major areas of your business. But surely the other slats lower to almost nothing. The reality is that even in good times, those slats are not always at the top. And it's like the weakest link in the chain analogy. That's where it breaks, and you can only really build your value up to that specific point. So when your barrel looks like this now, and you're feeling bled out, what do you do? How do you move forward? And of course, we've talked about this is the time where fear and anxiety and major amounts of tears start. That's where you get where you are. That's where we are. And let's face it, as stronger leaders as we are, we go through those moments of self-doubt, and it can be scary. But you cannot stay in this mode for long. You have to start moving out, build and restore the barrel to a barrel full of value, full of life again. So let's have a look at the various things that you need to do. Now, coming back to the issue of multitasking, Daniel's advice to me is, David, every single day, you have to focus, write it on your whiteboard, on all of these things. You have to do something little to advance each and every one of these things. So as you lift or two of these slats every day, you're going to feel good that you're doing something proactive, which is very important. Feeling good about doing something is important for your mental well-being, but it's also very good for your business because you move from fear and anxiety into action. And this is what I want to encourage you to do today. Move into the action phase. So the multitasking happens every day over all of these things. You have to do something little every day. So on your to-do list, you have to have those. I'm not going to tell you what to do with those segments because you have the skills and abilities to know what to do. I might just use one or two examples. But let's start with your people, because your people are as anxious as you are. And a leader has to show, one back. A leader has to show courage and put on the smile and to your people. That's you, and you've got to keep these people with you and their focus and mental well-being as well. So the people strategy, and not just one staff meeting and then you leave them for a month. You have to talk to your people daily, either in a staff meeting, one-on-ones, little touches, little 1-minute manager type of initiatives. And you have to do it. The innovation side of things, don't forget to innovate. There could be something in your business that you are able to bring in new and fresh. So look at that. Marketing. Of course, you've got no budget now to do any marketing, but you've got these wonderful social media tools where your voice can be heard, your brand can be put out there, and you know how to do that. So get on with it. Start marketing every day. Your clients, don't forget that they're going through the same trauma that you are. So talk to them often. Tell them what you can do. Tell them that you love them and care for them and are mindful of what they're going through. Even if they've cut their contract with you or they've postponed something, keep talking to them every day. Revenue and finances. Make sure that you're doing the right thing in the finance space. If it's talking to the bank manager about getting a payment holiday or your rent, addressing your expenses, cutting them down, you know what to do. Every day, do something on finance and revenue. Sales. You have to be selling, even now. You think there's no business out there, but Daryl's just said there is. You have to be selling. Your people have to be focused because this will come to an end. But you cannot stand there as a deer in the headlights, and nor can your team. Technology. Technology, you have to make sure that it keeps working. You have to find new technologies. This very webinar is an example of that. I'm learning to do my first webinar and Facebook Live post. Right now, I'm doing it first time, and we're getting it right, kind of. I'm sure it could be better, but we're rocking on it. Product and services. Now's a great time to reflect. You're not traveling around the world. You're not rushing around from one event to the next. So ask yourself the question, can our products and services be better? Can I innovate around this? Operations. I'm going to have to do more with less. How can I make my operations tighter, smoother, more productive? Supply chain. Don't forget about your supply chain. Those poor AV guys out there that are on a commission-only basis. Talk to them, extend a hand of friendship, find out how they're doing, keep in contact with your supply chain, because as Tes said, when the uptick comes, you have to have a supply chain that can still deliver excellence on your events and incentives. Legal. Get a good legal specialist, talk to them. Make sure that you're not falling foul of any law. Make sure that your client money that you might be holding is in trust and that you have ring-fenced it and that it's not going to use on other things. And if you do that every single day, the smile will come back on your face. And you're not going to be stuck in the media frenzy of what's happening around the world. You are going to be working on your business, and that's my message to you. So I now want to stop, pause, and obviously, you know, I'm a bit of an evangelist for entrepreneurs, and I really hope this message gets to the entrepreneurs. I hope you can find some practical ways to use these tips that I've given you. Also got a whole list of resources that I would like to share with you. These are some of the people that I have had coaching and expertise with. And I also want to give Sight a punch, not a punch, a punt. This list, most of these people I have met over 15 years of being a Sight member, actively involved in going to conferences and events, participating in local chapter meetings. That's where I've met these guys and girls. They are fantastic. I just want to run through the list very, very quickly. I've mentioned Daniel Trudy, Jim Adams in the USA, Gerrit Janssen in Germany, Martin Lewis, a wonderful friend of mine. He's actually stuck in Cape Town drinking copious amounts of wine. Martin, don't drink too much. Martin Cirque, amazing man, global perspective. Roger Tunder, founder of MCI, incredible man. He's available to talk to entrepreneurs. He knows what it's like. His business is also going through tough times, no doubt, but incredible guy, incredible resource. I know Didier, you've cited Roger as a great mentor to you. That David Hornby in the UK, Karina Bauer, CEO of IMEX, Rhonda Brewer in the United States. In South Africa, a friend of mine, Leon Kaplan, a fantastic financial coach. Ian Hatting on management training, Rick Taylor across Africa, Daniel Mason in Kenya, Hugh Tuckett in London, Patrick Etcher in South Africa, also a Pan-African legal specialist, Adeshola Ekpo in Nigeria, Gordon Fraser, my good friend that was COO of Microsoft in China, who's now bought a wine farm in Franschhoek and retired, but he's there and he helps me all the time. Dina Chetty and Ken Ironside. I've also listed some of my favorite authors that you can also reach out, and you'll get that in the document that we will send out later. So without further ado, Didier, would you like to make any final comments before Q&A?
Yeah, well, thank you, David. I mean, I've obviously, read all of the comments, and, thank you so much for your leadership. This grounding, which I admire in many people, grounding strategy into practice. And I think, most organizations do not fail because they have the wrong strategy, but they fail because they cannot execute it. And I think, what you just did was kind of giving a big picture, but at the same time, providing an awful lot of very practical, executionable tools. So, again, thank you so much for your leadership in doing this. I guess my comments would be, and this is kind of the motto of this call, you're not alone. And I think, there are a tremendous amount of resources that are available. I think these are times, and I've witnessed this for the last 3 weeks, when truly a community such as Sight is coming together, and it's coming into, helping one another, providing tips, supporting one another. I guess my main message would be, well, two things. One is, has been our kind of corporate, quote unquote, the corporation motto, which has been advocate for postpone, don't cancel. And I think that's something that, we need to remind ourselves and remind our clients and our stakeholders. The number two is this too will pass. And I think, we seeing it, again, we seeing it in China at the moment, as I alluded to previously. So how do we prepare ourselves for the rebound? You know, there will be a rebound. There's no doubt about that. I think, David, you outlined, you know, some of the practical measures that we can take. Talk to your banks, talk to your clients. You know, there's massive amount of government influx that is going into sustaining the economy. By all means, also talk to your policymakers. You know, we again, there's massive recovery funds, 750 billion euros being injected by the EU at the moment into the economy. How do we make a fair share of this? So how do we go back to the government, to your local, regional, national policymakers and saying, you know what, don't forget about us, because, you know, we are probably one of the hardest hit industry in the whole spectrum. So I think there should be a mobilization moment for all of our businesses to go back to government and saying, yes, you know, we know you will support banking. We know you will support agriculture. We know you will be supporting a number of sectors, but don't forget about us because we are a key economic driver. So I think there will be that message. There will be also a message of, again, you know, how do you weather the storm? Hang in tight, because this will rebound. And, you know, the current kind of time frame that we're looking from the start of a pandemic to the peak of it, to the end of it, is between 4 to 6 months. So understand these are extremely hard times, but at the same time, you know, let's not forget that we'll come out of this. So what can we do to protect our businesses, to protect our people, to protect ourselves? Stay strong, stay home, stay healthy, is the message that I want to convey. But again, come strong out of this.
Thank you, Didier. Let's go to the Q&As. I'm just being handed by my moderator assistant. Margarita asks the question, are your countries putting in place plans to support businesses in our industry? I think we've kind of touched on that, Didier. Anybody want to say anything? Maybe Tes, you can, from a South African point of view.
Yeah, thanks, David. In fact, I did forget to mention, I received a thing this morning. It's a website called businesstech.co.za, where it is confirmed that the Department of Small Business Development is establishing a debt relief fund. A link with Amelia, and she'll share it with everybody afterwards. Obviously, only relevant for South African businesses, but I trust our friends in Nigeria, Botswana, Rwanda, all of those listening in Zimbabwe, that you could also have an approach to your governments and their financial departments to seek similar assistance. It's out there. Obviously, it's not going to be easy or quick to access, as David said. But from a South African point of view, it is being put in place as we speak.
Thanks, Tes. Appreciate that answer. Eddie, Patrick asks, are there any DMO government support available for businesses? I think that's covered. Daryl, do you know of any, or from a...
Hi, Dave. Sorry, just unmuting. No, nothing direct. SATSA, once again, for South and Southern Africa is engaging with government. But, you know, to be honest, in our continents, we don't have the social security systems in place that Europe and parts of North America do. It's going to possibly be tougher for us, but obviously we take whatever assistance we can get. And if we hear of any other schemes, as Tes alluded to, I think it'd be great that we share them on this platform. Okay, great. And then there's a question from Rick. Is there a common denominator as to when the virus may be arrested? IATA are forecasting September. Other commentators are saying 6 months, other 18 months, a difficult one. Any insights?
Who wants to, you know, we're obviously not coronavirus specialists here. We're more talking about the practical aspects, but Didier, you might.
David, if I may?
Yes, go for it.
There was another webinar, a very good one with John Howell from AviaDev the other day, which I did share that on my LinkedIn, but I'll send that to Amelia as well to share. They took an in-depth look at previous pandemics, in particular SARS, and the indication of 6 months. You know, if we take it on the same kind of timelines, 6 months is realistic.
Yeah, I guess this is all this is Didier. This is all dependent on the measures taken by governments and the discipline of the population. You know, the outbreak took place late December in China, in Wuhan, Hubei province. Over the last couple of days, there has been no indigenous case for COVID in Hubei, which would suggest that if you take some extremely strong confinement procedures, it could actually be contained when it comes to the peak of the epidemic within a 6-month period. Again, this is all driven by the discipline of the population / in the Chinese case, the government impose measures on the population. And I think that that's what we're seeing in Europe at the moment. I mean, I'm currently in Belgium. We're in total confinement. You cannot get out of your home unless you have a valid reason to do so. All shops are closed. All bars, restaurants, discos, and the recommendation is that you divide your social interaction by 4. And that's what seems to be able to kind of curve the pandemic. So I think it could be longer than that if the government is not, you know, taking the curfew action that it needs to take and the confinement action that it needs to take. If the population is not disciplined to carry it on. But again, between the start of the outbreak and the peak, which doesn't mean the end of it, it looks like, you know, it could be a 4 to 5 month period being disciplined. So again, not obviously part of the World Health Organization, but clearly have been following this extremely closely. I think it's all going to be down to, you know, what would the African government decide to do and where they would want to go and how hard do they want to enforce this, and then what is the...
Thanks, Didier. I think just for those global audiences, South Africa have really applied very, very stringent measures. We have a total travel ban, not as hard as what it sounds like in Brussels yet, but certainly people are working from home. No alcohol can be served in any venue after 6 p.m. in the evenings, and so on. And these are all great signs. I can't really speak for other African countries. I do know Rwanda has been very effective in making that happen, a similar process there. But they've had to deal with these kind of things before with Ebola. So they're probably a little bit more equipped than we are. And so are those countries around the East African environment because of their preparedness with other types of viruses. But I think we, from an African point of view, are all trying very hard to be globally aligned with global standards around this. And flattening the curve is well understood in our part of the world. And our communities are very, very actively engaged in being law-abiding and part of the solution. Because unfortunately, we do have very vulnerable communities, people living with TB, HIV, immune compromised communities, and we would hate for them to get affected in any way or form. So we're taking it extremely seriously in Africa. Daryl, would you like to pose any questions? We've kind of, I don't see any more. Amelia, do we have any more questions? It is almost time to wrap up. So let's have wrap-up comments. First of all, from Daryl, then Tes, then Didier, and I'll then sign out.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I think very briefly for me, this kind of webinar or interaction, you can do this on a smaller scale within your immediate networks. We have one of the site past presidents and a good friend is Rhonda Brewer, and Rhonda is holding virtual happy hour in a few hours. And that kind of thing, it sounds weird, but I think there are probably over 100 people that are going to connect digitally and say cheers to this week, which has been tough for everybody. But yeah, share, communicate, don't sit there and sort of dwell on the negative. Start, as I was so tough to hear, planning for the positive. Daniel Schudy shared on the chat that the Swiss Air have a team in place already planning for the busy period as we recover. And saying that it might be busier than the period that we're going through where we're sorting out the negative side of this. So yeah, keep the faith and ask if you need questions answered. And within this forum, there's a number of people that jump in and help.
Thank you, Daryl, and all the very best with your leadership and business going forward. You know, I'm also here close to you, and whatever we can do together, we will stand united in this. Tes, would you like to your wrap-up remarks?
Thanks, David. Yeah, for those who have not seen the comment yet, it was just announced that SAA has now cancelled all flights. So then I love Hugo Slimbrook's comment, hiding a beer in every room in the house and doing a pub crawl later. Sounds like fun, and yeah, we're in this together, and we'll get through this together. And David, thank you for initiating this this event.
Thank you, Tes. You're a fantastic leader, and we will be 100% behind you and the efforts that you need to make. So, yep, we probably will have a follow-up webinar, maybe. We'll put our heads together and see what else is useful. We're going to put out a little survey to those that have participated, and on that basis, you know, get your input as an audience. What would you like to hear more about? And I think Site Global will be doing a very similar thing to understand what its membership would like educational content to be targeted at. On that score, Didier, would you like to have your wrap-up comments?
Yeah, well, first of all, David, you know, thank you so much for initiating this in record time and rallying the troops, and I commend you for your leadership. I think also the prime responsibility of a leader is to confront reality, and I think, you know, the reality of what we're going through is that it's going to get worse before it gets better. Though the good news is that it is going to get better. So, you know, we will emerge out of this as a resilient industry. Resilient doesn't mean doing more of the same. Resilient means adapting to the new reality. And I think that's, you know, what's upon us, again, as business leaders in this industry, is kind of looking at what would that new reality look like, and how do we emerge from this stronger? Again, I think, you know, for the next probably 8 to 10 weeks, I don't think there's going to be tons of really good news when it comes to our industry. And how do we weather the storm? I think you've outlined some tremendous, you know, pointers in terms of what we should do as business leaders to ensure business continuity when it comes to cash flow, negotiating with the banks, being honest with our clients, postpone, don't cancel. I mean, all of these different measures. And I think that's the best we can do at the moment. But the pandemic seems to be weathering in Asia. It's hard hitting Europe, but again, even Europe is only at the beginning stage of this. I think Africa will see some of that, maybe not in all countries. Hopefully the virus is allergic to heat and humidity, which would be good news, but we don't know that yet. But I think, right now is all about let's stay together, let's connect, let's mobilize the community, and we'll go through this by webinars like this. So again, David, thanks a lot for putting this together.
My pleasure, Didier, and thank you for making yourself available. We really appreciate it at short notice. I just want to give out a shout out to all of those of you who shared this and posted this online so that we could spread the message and get a great audience. Thank you very much for participating. It's been a fabulous audience size in record time, and we hope to do more of these things as site. And then, just one of those guys that were really active in putting the message out there was my friend Andy Tolkien from Evintra. Thank you for that, Andy. And so my signing off comment was, remember the barrel. Remember what those slats are. Do a little bit of work on each of those every day. And more than that, ask your significant other to hold you accountable to doing that. Get them to, instead of asking you, how was your day? And you give them a glib answer, yeah, it was fine, thank you. And then you head for your bottle of wine or whatever you're going to drown your sorrows in. Rather, give them a list of all of those things and ask them, what did you do with your people today? What did you do with finance? What did you do on marketing? What did you do on sales? And hold yourself accountable to taking action on each one of those segments every day. And you will see a difference. And when you come out of this, you'll come out stronger. I'm absolutely sure. This is David Sand, CEO of Iwin International and past president of Site Global. I'm so proud to be a member of this incredible community. Stay strong, stay healthy, and lots of love. Signing out now.